Hello, One Alls. My view of My Hero Academia, chapter 344, stars. And what do you know? I was right! Yay! Shinzo was in fact brainwashing Ayama's parents, and even Ayama himself, to make sure that All for One couldn't tell they were lying. Even though that is something he very clearly said he could not do before. But as a result of a whole bunch of training, he was able to improve his quirk, and now he can control people. Neat! Though I just have a lot of questions about that. I mean, how exactly is Shinzo training his quirk? I mean, for Deku, Bako, Shoto, training their quirk is fairly simple, you know? They fight a bunch, they hit walls, they punch over and over again, and eventually they get a better mastery of their quirk and they can use it in different ways. But Shinzo, you know, his quirk is brainwashing. He needs somebody to actually be able to brainwash to train his quirk, so who exactly has he been training with? I mean, the principal said he's been training with Aizawa, but I really just truly cannot imagine Aizawa letting himself get brainwashed over and over again for the sake of helping Shinzo train his quirk. I mean, Aizawa is a great teacher. He is a really amazing teacher, but I think he'd have too much pride for that, so who exactly has Shinzo been brainwashing? I mean, I guess the best bet would be the general studies students, Shinzo's fellow students who, you know, aren't actually in the hero program, but are at UA. I mean, they'd certainly want to help Shinzo, the star of their class, shine even brighter, so maybe they volunteered, maybe they took shifts. Oh god, I want an entire spin-off just on Shinzo's life. That'd be so amazing. I'm also rather curious about how exactly Shinzo is controlling their voice, making them talk, because he said the method to make it work is even more intense. And then when he's actually trying to, you know, puppet and control Ayama's mother, you can see that he's actually like raising his hand, pointing it at her, and just sweating profusely. He didn't have to do that before. In the past, whenever he controlled a person, you know, as soon as they responded to him, they were under his control, regardless of whatever pose he was making. But now here he has to actually raise his hand and point it towards them. Does that improve his control? Also, his gloves don't actually have fingers on them, or at least two of the fingers on his gloves don't actually have, you know, fingers on them, so what's up with that? Does he actually need to have like a direct line from his hand to whoever he's trying to control? I'm very, very curious about that. Like I said before, I want to see so much more of Shinzo. And so is the rest of Class 1A. They are just really impressed with him, and they're all super excited to have him join their team. Oh god, they are just so over the top here in their chibi forms, as Shinzo is just sighing with exasperation. Oh god, I really, really need to make sure I end up in Class 1B instead of 1A. Oh, Shinzo, I know, they can be exhausting. They can be very, very exhausting. Oh yeah, another weird detail of this chapter is that in order to participate in this operation, Shinzo needed to get a special permission from the current acting head of the Safety Commission, which... Oh, wow. I mean, Japan, you are literally in the middle of an apocalypse right now, and you're still, you know, following protocol? You're still ensuring that you get permission from the government before you act? Seriously? That felt unnecessary. That felt very, very unnecessary. Especially when, can we even really say that Mira isn't a spy working for All for One? I mean, that just felt like an extra step they really didn't need to take. Especially because, as far as I can tell, Shinzo isn't actually here on the battlefield. I mean, I didn't see him on the battlefield. He was just brainwashing some people while they were very far away from All for One to lead him into a trap, and yet he still needed permission to use his quirk for that. That is insane. That is seriously insane. Also, I just really freaking love this big double thumbs up he gives to Ayama before he makes the call, or maybe after he makes the call. Just, oh my god, that is so not like him, and it was so absolutely freaking hilarious. I mean, is that his new way of controlling someone, of brainwashing people? He needs to give them a thumbs up, and if they respond with a thumbs up as well, then he can control them and make them talk? I mean, that seems just so very incredibly unlikely, but more so than Shinzo just deciding to start giving people thumbs up like that. I love it, I love it. Anyway, though, back to this chapter, we get a flashback to when this whole plan came together, and as the detective explains, their attempt to find All for One has gone really, really poorly. Basically, they have not found a single hair or trace of All For One anywhere, and even if they spend the next 10 years looking, it is really unlikely they'll be able to find him, especially because All For One has the search quirk, and he's, put a tracker on all of them. He knows exactly where everyone is, so he can always hide if they get anywhere near him. So yeah, basically this whole let's try and find All For One plan was doomed to fail from the very beginning. But on the bright side, All For One sees them searching. All For One sees them desperately looking for him and getting no results. So All For One thinks, okay, they don't have a better plan than just, blindly searching through the darkness, trying to stumble upon me. Therefore, they're desperate. Therefore, they must not be plotting anything. Therefore, they must not have some big, massive plan to capture me in some sort of giant trap. But they did. They did. Of course, this new plan still has a problem that All For One has a tracker on most of the pro heroes and most of the people in Class 1A, so therefore, if they try to set a trap for him, All For One will see it coming from a mile away, and thus they need a way to get all the pro heroes, all of Class 1A to the battlefield as quickly as possible. And that's where Korogiri comes in! Yay! No, not so much. Because as it turns out, Korogiri still hasn't woken up yet, and therefore they need to rely on Monoma. And last chapter when I saw him use Korogiri's quirk, I'm like, oh, that's a cool move, that's a smart move, I wouldn't have thought of that, and I just moved on. I never stopped to consider Korogiri's quirk must be an incredibly complicated quirk. The kind of quirk that would take, years to master, and yet they had to have Monoma essentially learn it, practice with it in 10-minute intervals, and master it in the span of just a few days. This dude had to create multiple portals, living to multiple different destinations, all in the blink of an eye, all after just a few days of training. The amount of effort he would have to put into mastering this quirk just completely boggles the mind. So yeah, Monoma, while he might be a bit player, while he might be a side character, he was certainly a star this chapter. And as a result, All For One didn't see this plan coming because All For One never looked to Monoma. I mean, his quirk is be able to copy other quirks for 10 minutes. That would do absolutely nothing for All For One, who can just steal quirks. He doesn't have to bother with copying them. Same way Shinzo, I mean, yes, his brainwashing quirk is useful, but for All For One, he's much better at manipulating and controlling people, even without the quirk, so he was just a bit player. He was someone that All For One ignored. He was somebody that All For One didn't mark with a search quirk, and as a result, All For One did not see the trap coming. All For One didn't realize the true heroes, Monoma and Shinzo, were waiting in the wings, that these side characters would doom him, that these side characters would trap him and defeat him. I love it, I love it. I also just absolutely freaking love the spinning, maniacal laughter Monoma does after he teleports onto the battlefield. Oh, that is so next level. That is so beyond next level. That is truly plus ultra right there, and I freaking love it. Anyway, though, the fact that Korogiri still hasn't woken up yet is definitely a sign that he's going to. At some point in this fight, Korogiri will wake up, Aizawa's voice will reach him, and together they'll find a way to stop All For One. They'll find a way to weaken him enough where Deku is able to deliver the finishing blow. And I think it does actually make a lot of sense. I mean, Aizawa said this chapter, since losing my eye, my erasure is all but useless, which... interesting. Definitely interesting. I mean, when I first read that line, I assumed that he was saying that because, he can only see out of one eye, his peripheral vision's really damaged, and therefore, if All For One just darts to the right, then, he'll miss him. He won't be able to see him over here because he can only see over in this direction. But if that were the case, I kind of feel like Aizawa in the past would have been able to, basically blink one eye at a time, I mean, that's the whole thing. Whenever he blinks, whenever he loses eye contact with someone, his negation is stopped, and then that person can use their quirk again. But if he had just, like I said, blinked one eye at a time, he would have been able to water his eyes while keeping contact with the person almost indefinitely. So, does the quirk actually require both eyes? I mean, if so, he would have said that his quirk is completely useless. He would have said that his quirk can't be used at all anymore, but now he says it's all but useless, which makes it sound to me like maybe it still can be used. Maybe instead of nullifying a quirk, it weakens a quirk. Because if so, that could still be very beneficial if he teams up with Korogiri, if he teams up with his old friend Shirakumo. I mean, seriously, imagine Korogiri creating a portal just about this big that leads directly to All For One. Aizawa can just stick his eye up to it and nullify his quirk or weaken his quirk from miles and miles away while remaining relatively safe. I really want to see that before this fight comes to an end. Actually, I'm looking at this again. Did Aizawa actually use his quirk this chapter? Because it seems like when Shigaraki first arrives, he touches the ground as if trying to activate his quirk, and then nothing happens and he gets really surprised. So was Aizawa nullifying his quirk from a distance there? I mean, I'm not sure about that. Very confused, very confused. Anyway, though, then we have Dabi, who has a rather interesting line here. You ain't the boss of me, leader. He refers to Shigaraki as his leader, while also saying that he's not his boss. Oh, Dabi, I love you. I love how just completely and utterly insane you are. And thankfully he is stopped by Shoto, who arrives with the rest of Class 1A, which, yay! I mean, I saw a lot of confusion about that last chapter because, we only saw really the pro heroes in Class 3, the big three, showing up last chapter, and there was no real sign of Class 1A, the characters we've come to know and love since basically the start of the series. So there was a lot of confusion over where exactly they were, what exactly they were doing during this fight. And as it turns out, they were just, the second string. They were coming, but, first and foremost, we had to get the pro heroes in because they were the ones who could really hold back the villains. And then the trap was sprung, because as it turns out, underneath this battlefield was Troy, this giant mechanical cage manufacturing machine thing, which trapped all the villains for, at least a couple seconds, long enough for them to get pushed into these new portals created by Monoma and hopefully separate everybody. And All For One seems rather confused by this, though I am actually kind of curious if he's going to do anything to stop it. I mean, he has a lot of quirks. He has so very, very many quirks. And so does Shigaraki. They could probably stop this if they really wanted to, but do they? I mean, this is their chance. This is their one big chance to stop Deku, to take One For All for themselves and acquire true ultimate power. I mean, All Might even said if they get One For All, they will have no reason to hide ever again. They will just destroy everything in their freaking paths. So maybe he'll just accept being trapped. Maybe he'll accept being whisked off to some unknown location, confident that he and Shigaraki will be able to stop whatever the heroes throw at them. Curious. Also, one final thing I want to talk about. When All Might and the detective are watching this all go down, they're like, this is it, All Might, this is the thing we've been planning for so long. We once failed to put him down properly, and he may have ripped your guts out, but we're both here. We're both still alive. Curious, very, very curious. I mean, the big battle, the big fight between All For One and All Might. That is something that has been talked about since, literally the very first chapter of the series. It was a fight, so massive, so insane that it almost killed All Might in his prime, and yet something that nobody knows about. It's something that was hidden from the public. What exactly was this fight? Where did it take place? How did All Might lead All For One into a trap? And what role exactly did the detective have in this? Did the detective keep it from the general public? Did the detective keep anyone finding out? Was the detective involved in tracking down All For One? I have so many questions about this freaking fight. Seriously, we need to see it at some point. We abso-freaking-lutely need to see it at some point. Even if it's just a 5-minute flashback in the next movie, I want to see this fight. I have so many freaking questions about it. But please let me know down below. Do you think the trap worked? Do you think they'll actually all be put into the portals and sent to different locations? If so, who's fighting who? What's going to be the breakdowns of the battle? How exactly is Shinzo making people talk? What kind of training did he undergo to acquire this new ability? And just what's going to happen next? I mean, it seems like this is it. This is the end game of the series. Whole bunch of big one-on-one battles as we slowly whittle down the villain's power and eventually manage to defeat All For One and Shigaraki, bring an end to this age-old evil. Huzzah! But please, let me know down below. Be sure to like and subscribe. See you on the next video. And until then, peace!